My name is Jambareeqi, and joining me for an interview is Tommy Robin, who also goes by the name of Ockeroid. Tommy is an animator and composer best known for his short comedy cartoons that he publishes on the internet and the music scores he provides for Flash games. Hello, Tommy.
Well, hello there.
I'd like to begin by asking you, which university did you graduate from?
I didn't graduate. I actually went to Sheffield Hallam for a year, but I didn't like it, so I left.
Did you benefit from anything from university, though?
um, for me, I think it was quite weird because I'm actually home educated, so I'd been doing kind of my own thing and kind of like sort of learning for a lot of years beforehand, and then with the course I went on was like a sort of very art course, and it was very like self sort of learning and stuff like, and all about kind of finding how to sort of teach yourself stuff. And so for me, I kind of found, oh, that's kind of what I was doing anyway, but there's a bunch of stuff that uh, wasn't really adding to what I was doing. So for me at the time, I think I kind of wasn't ready for that kind of learning as well. So I think actually the main thing I got from going to uni was just because, like I say, it was like I said, it was a contemporary art media course, um, and I was just always doing animation because that was just like what I knew, and they were the first people to sort of really say, "Oh yeah, but why is this an animation?" As in, because they were all sort of like, why is it animation, not like a sculpture or a painting or a play or something like that. So I think that was, I think, the main thing that I actually took away from that, despite it being completely the wrong course for what I was doing, was just making me think, okay, cool. Well, if it's going to be, you shouldn't just do something just because that's all you know. Like, why is it that medium? Which is kind of a weird thing to take away from it, but that's sort of what I took away from it anyway.
When did you first take an interest in animation?
Uh, Probably way back when I was about 10 was the first kind of like real interest in sort of like me doing it myself. I had a Game Boy camera. I noticed that on slideshow mode, if you took a picture of like a toy, I think it was like a Thomas the Tank Engine toy, and you put it like in a slightly different position in each photo, then actually when you watched back these images in a series, even though it's just supposed to be a slideshow, it would look like it was moving. And then from there on, it would just be kind of like graduating up to just like whatever was sort of like around at the time, like making animated GIFs and eventually Flash and stuff like that. So sort of, I suppose that for me is kind of like my first actual real, like, oh hey, this is animation, this is really cool, and I want to do it kind of thing.
Who or what would you consider to be your major influences on your animation work?
Ooh, I suppose there's quite well, obviously for anyone, there's quite a lot. Um, in terms of like animation style, I really like uh, stuff like Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab um, and I really like that kind of style where it's like um, kind of like very dramatic and sort of like quite filmic, but really knows it's a cartoon still. Um, I think for me that's the whole thing. Like I always feel kind of halfway between um, like dramatic live action films and just silly cartoons. I think that's always for me what inspires me the most is when you get something that can be like quite funny and silly, but also really dramatic. Like um, a lot of the old Aardman tunes, like the old Wallace and Gromit ones. Those sort of like for me that is like my ultimate goal would be if I could do something as good as like the Wrong Trousers or something like that. That's kind of like my ultimate inspiration in terms of like bigger shorts. But in terms of just my sort of silly fun stuff that I've put out online, then it's yeah, it's just sort of more cartoony stuff like Powerpuff Girls and a lot of other animes, obviously like Ego Raptor and Happy Harry and those guys who were around before me and stuff.
Now, I've noticed some distinct similarities between your character designs and the character designs for the sitcom Daria. Have you seen Daria and would you consider it to be an influence?
That's interesting. Yeah, I wasn't actually that big of a fan of it. I remember I went through a phase of liking it a little bit, um, but it's not like a conscious influence of like really that. I think uh, I think that comes from kind of like the comment I get a lot more is actually with everyone seems to say a lot of the non-animated people seem to say that it reminds them a lot of Japanese stuff. I think it's that same sort of sensibilities that like Daria has, where it's like it's a cartoon, but then like proportioned. They're like look like human proportions, and it's just a bit more everyday kind of things that they're doing. But then I also really like that super thick line style that Daria has. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Now that you mentioned it, is actually pretty damn similar. but yeah.
Now, Ockeroid, you are a freelance animator. What kind of services do you provide for your customers?
Um, Normally when I've been on, it's been because I don't quite consider myself like a just an animator. Because I'm not the best animator in the world, and I'm not really the best of many things in the world. But I think I'm all right at kind of putting a whole thing together. So normally when I've been brought on, it's to kind of like rather than just animate this section, it's normally kind of like, oh, come up with the whole, a little. They'll have like a rough outline for what needs to happen in like a Flash movie or like a rough style, and then I'll kind of just like sort of build up that whole sort of thing. So it's sort of like a bit of design and um, a bit of story and a bit of storyboarding and a bit of animation as well. So it's kind of this weird whole package type thing is what I've ended up doing. But then sometimes there's little odd jobs between where it's like sometimes someone will just want a quick character design thing or a quick this or that or a logo or whatever.
And how much budget do you have for these services that you provide?
Uh, Normally not too much. Normally I'm sort of over ambitious or under ambitious. I'm not sure which would be where it's and sort of thinking, oh, I can get it done quicker. So I probably undercharge myself a little bit much because I'm still pretty new to it. So I'm still working that whole thing out. Um, so normally it's really just enough for me to sort of like live on for that little bit, and then I got to go out and get another one. Really, just enough for me, no hiring anyone else or anything.
How much do you get paid to do these freelance services?
It really depends on who it is because like there's some people where it's just like real indie. And it's like if there's some other Flash guys that I know, then sort of like we'll do it for free, but then we'll help each other out and stuff like that. Or if it's like sometimes it's just sort of more like publicity type thing. But then sort of if it's like on the other far end, if it's like a full on corporate thing, then often that's a lot more because that's kind of like your proper. There's a kind of different standard of like how high you've got to do it to. So it just really varies on like who it is and what kind of project it is and how free you can be. So I think the thing is it's kind of what you'd get back would be very different stuff depending on what the project is anyway.
What would you say are the benefits from freelance animating?
Well, I think obviously the big best one is just you've got the just more freedom for it really. You're not sort of just well, it's kind of hard for me to say because I've not really done the other end of it, like studio animation work. But I do really enjoy kind of having the different projects. I think is my main thing actually, where you can just I know it's quite exciting to sort of like just really delve into this one project really intensely for like a couple of weeks, and then it's done. It's this nice finished thing, and it's off, and whatever's happened, and then on the next one it's something completely different. Um, and yeah, sort of the freedom to have all these different weird mix match of stuff. Because I think for me, I wouldn't. It'd be really weird for me because I've got such a weird blend of stuff that I do. So like obviously there'd be no studio job where you're sort of like an animator and a composer because that'd be insane. But then doing freelance, you can kind of do a bit of both. So and sort of whatever comes up.
Have you ever considered working for a major animation company?
I hadn't for a long time, but I have actually been considering it recently, just in terms of sort of having that more reliability and stuff, and getting it going. But I think it's difficult for me anyway, because I think a lot of the UK animation scene is quite different from a lot of the kind of stuff I'm really into. Because like I kind of like a lot more of kind of it's sort of more the slightly kind of like more like teen boys kind of like stuff is the kind of stuff I'm used to watching and liking and everything. But then I like kind of Cartoon Network stuff and or any of that stuff. I don't really. So there's not really that kind of thing for it in England at the moment. So for a long time I hadn't thought about that, but I've been looking more at the kind of advert side as well and some other stuff. So Yeah, I'm considering it now anyway. So, because it looks actually there is some interesting stuff there once you start looking a bit deeper.
What would you consider to be the hardest thing about animating?
Um, in terms of from where I'm coming from, sort of like having to do like be really the difficult thing about animation. I think if you're doing just your fully like you're making a short yourself is I think time management and the fact that with animation you've got to do every job. If you're doing kind of like web animation like I'm used to, you've got to do every job, but people often forget kind of like you're basically being the producer as well, which is really hard to do because it's quite, there's challenges once you're in the middle of doing it and sort of in the thick of a deadline and whatever. But then they're all stuff you can kind of work out, but it's really hard to be working on like a creative like challenge. And then you've also got to be thinking, damn, but I also really, really have to work out if I'm going to be able to do all of that in time, or like how am I going to be able to do all of this in time for that, or how am I make sure this continues getting done? Because it's just a very, I think for me, the biggest, the most difficult thing is that swapping between the kind of thinking you have to do. Um, yeah, I'd say that's sort of the most difficult thing.
What's the thing you enjoy the most about animate?
For me, it's just being able to like tell a little story. Really, that's kind of why I go for it. Because each little thing has its own part that's quite fun once you get into it. But for me, the thing I enjoy the most is really the reason I do animation is because it's this great way to just I know have a story and get it out there and people can see it and it's just all from your mind.
Have you ever considered making a full-length animated feature?
Um, maybe when I was like 11 or 12 and I was sort of like, yeah, that'll be cool. I could just do that. Yeah, like I had a friend who's he decided we just got Flash and he decided, yeah, it's cool. I'm going to just completely redo all of Terminator 2 but with sticks, all of it. And yeah, no, not since then, not since I knew how much it'd be there. Maybe it's something I would like to do in the future. Um, but I think making a feature is so different, just in terms of a well of like having the quality of writing you've got to have to keep it interesting. Just not even going into like the technical side of like doing something on that scale. Um, so it's something I would like to do one day, but it's like way out there, so I don't really think about it at the moment.
What is your opinion on the current state of British animation?
Um, well, I feel whatever I say would kind of unfair because I've only recently really properly started looking at it because I've been mainly considered myself sort of from online rather than that, even though a lot of the online stuff I do is like English anyway. Um, I think I don't know. I think there've been some pretty exciting times with British animation. Like I think the whole Aardman thing where it started out was really exciting. Um, I think to be honest, I probably need to. I don't know. I sort of don't feel like I should really make a sort of judgment on where it's at the moment until I've sort of like really dug in further.
Now, most of your cartoons rely on a joke or a sketch. Would you say comedy is a difficult process?
It's it's one of those weird ones where it's either it's super easy when it's like everything's working and gelling, but then once you've kind of like really got to take it apart and say, okay, cool, this isn't working because then that's when it can be really difficult. So sometimes you can have something like really nice and pure and raw, particularly with your really short stuff, where it can just like come out really quick and it's brilliant, it feels great and really smooth. But then, yeah, I think once you get into this, maybe the slightly longer stuff, like some of the stuff I don't have out finished animated yet, it's like there's a lot more having to tinker with it, and it's I think what makes it difficult with animation is the fact that you get sick of the joke, so you really have to make sure like you get all of that done in like a really solid like animatic, so that you don't have to think about timing and stuff later because you will not find the joke funny. Like I think that's the thing. You talk to any particularly any online animator, and there's always like everyone who like always says there's like this phase towards like when you're like 70% done through it, where you just everyone even like sort of like the best people have said sort of like they get to this point and they're just like, why the hell did I make this? This is not funny at all. No one's going to like this. I'm going to kill myself after I've done this because this is so bad. And then you put it out and it's fine and stuff like that, and people love it or they hate it. But it's like just the fact of like even like some of the best, most funny tunes that are out there, like the artists have said that they thought it was like rubbish for like a certain point of it. So I think that's just the thing, is just keeping perspective is the main tough thing I find.
Now, you're also a composer. Your music varies from ambience to dance. Are you a self taught composer, or did you have lessons?
Totally self-taught. Basically, when I was 17, I was like, oh, I'll get a bass guitar. I'll probably, be classic bass guitar, classic teenage thing, and just it'll be lying in my room. But in the end, I ended up sort of like pushing it further and further and being getting more instruments, and eventually sort of just wanting to learn more and more about it, just because it was sort of like this really sort of like free, great hobby. Um, and then it was thinking, oh great, I could do music for my tunes, I could do music for this, I could do this kind of music and that, and um, just building up there. I have done a few courses in mixing and recording, but not in actual composition. Um, and those sort of came a lot later as well.
Who are the major influences on your music?
Well, I got kind of like a weird bunch. I really like a lot of the old, this weird bunch of like a lot of the cheesy guys, well, it seems mean to call him cheesy, but like Nobuo Uematsu of all like the Final Fantasy stuff like that. I think he's got some like really great music, but it's just really hard when you play it to someone who's like not familiar with video game music, because they just hear like the bad sound quality of it, and sort of like a lot of the stuff like I actually think some people find this hilarious, but I think Sonic 2 is one of the best soundtracks in video games. Um, So I think basically kind of like every so often I always go back to stuff like Sonic 2 and just sort of like try and pick out something else to learn from it, because I just think it's just there's so much like great stuff in how those songs are made to make them so interesting and catchy, despite the fact that they're like 60 seconds long. But then there's a lot of other people like sort of the film score stuff. Like I like drawing a blank on his name, but the guy who does the music for Dexter. I really like a lot of that style. I like also sort of a lot of those weird, sort of more ambient, more chill out stuff like the band Air. They're really cool for that kind of stuff. Um, I like a lot of 80s stuff as well, sort of like sort of synth pop stuff.
What do you believe is the key to making good music?
Ooh, I don't know. It's I don't really think there's one key. I think the thing with music is like there's a lot of different things that make a good track, and a track can be good for a lot of different reasons. So like you can have something that's like compositionally really, really good, and that'll put it, so much of the way. But then if it's not, performed well, and if it's not produced well, then it kind of won't matter. But then you can have it the other way and have like produced brilliantly, but then so you've always got to have like this balancing act. I think for any one of those things, so I think it's just getting the right blend and sort of like working out what's important for that track to really make it shine. Because like a lot of the stuff I do for like film stuff, it's not really that much like complicated composition in it, but like there's a lot of complicated production. I think for that works really well, because all it really needs is to like set this mood. So I think there's just so many different things that like music can do, that you just got to think, okay, what's got to assess what you're trying to do, and like what's going to be most effective to actually do that. So it's being able to, I think the key would just being able to have the ear to sort of be able to work that out really.
You often contribute your music to video games by Armor Games. How much creative freedom are you given when you're attached to one of their projects?
Well, it's quite weird with a lot of those, because they're all with uh, Tony or the XP. So quite good buds with him, and they're often like a different story. So with some of them, like I've been came and sort of said, "Oh, cool, do you want to do this music?" And they're Tony's pretty open and just sort of like, "Yeah, that's brilliant," or and sort of is quite cool with like what I go for normally. But then sometimes like the one I'm most well known for is, what is it, Colm, or Kolm, or um, and that one was really strange, because actually I didn't write anything for that. I'd already written all of those, and I just sent him the the track that ended up being the main theme. I just sent it to him because like I did it and it wasn't even up online anywhere. And then I didn't speak to him for a few months. And then I spoke to him again. And he's like, "Oh, by the way, I made a game based around that track, and I've used all your other music for it, and I'm going to upload it in the next few days." It was like, "Oh, okay." So, and with all of the Colm music, the majority of that has ended up being stuff that I'd already done, apart from the spin-off, which was like remixed versions of them. But yeah, no, that's again, that's why I like a lot of the again with the freelance side of it, because then a lot of those there's a huge amount of creative freedom within, as long as you're fitting with the style, as long as you're contributing to the game, it kind of it and not not distracting or anything like that, then it's all fair game really.
Is there anything in particular that you would like to accomplish in the near future?
Yeah, well, the stuff that I've kind of been doing a lot recently, that's all been going towards it's been kind of moving away from the comedy and doing kind of more, well, sort of quote, serious stuff, and stuff. The stuff that I'd more like to accomplish, like this year, I'd really like to have some stuff out that rather than just making someone laugh, I'd like to kind of have like the other emotions, like move someone in some way. Um, it's just a very different kind of thing. Like, it's not saying that either one's better, but it's just that's kind of the kind of thing I'm a bit more interested in. So I think, I suppose that's the kind of thing I'd like to accomplish. I'd really like to sort of sort of move someone, or make someone think about something. Be like, yeah, I guess.
Is there anyone in particular that you would love to work with in the future?
Um, well, there's lots of guys that lots of Flash guys that I know that I'd love to work with. That hopefully I am going to soon. Like, yeah, there's. I'm quite excited about possibility of working with. I'm just trying to remember what his actual username is now. Boy Bogart, who did all the animations for Ace Pilot. He's an amazing animator. He's really, really great style, like really brilliant. And I like been a fan of his for ages. And we've been talking through Twitter for ages. And then it's finally just before 2012, we started chatting about saying, "Oh, cool, we'll do a collaboration on something soon." It's like, yeah, so that's one guy that I'd really like to work with. So I'm hoping that does end up happening.
What do you think of the Flash cartoons that are currently on the internet?
um, they're pretty interesting because I think it's brilliant, and it's made you know uh, so many things possible for animators and animation fans, and it's amazing. But I think you can see you are quite limited in terms of like you've got to have something. Well, at the moment, the kind of the models that really work are just like something short and punchy and funny. There are other ones that aren't that have done really well, but I think um, I think that's so I think it's really great, but I think it feels like be interesting to see if there's how like other types of content come out of that. Is kind of like what I'm sort of most wondering about in terms of that, and like how I'm just interested in sort of seeing if it can if other kind of genres of stuff or other kind of models of stuff will evolve is kind of my main wonder for it. 'Cause I think it's really great, but then it's kind of if you're not doing like a parody or something like that, then often it can be kind of hard to get attention. But I suppose with viral stuff, then you just never know anyway, because it's just the kind of thing where okay, that just connects with a bunch of people, and um, but yeah, I guess.
What advice would you give to someone who is interested in freelance animating as a career?
Hmm. Well, for me, the way I got most of my work has been through kind of the online stuff, so I can only kind of really go from that perspective, really. But I think um, I think you've got to make sure you've got like your body of work and your stuff to show. And actually, I think the advice I would give is about probably learning to network, I guess. I think that's the main thing that can so you can be a fantastic animator, but if you kind of don't know how to sort of like get on with someone and sort of like build a contact, then it's very hard to do to make much money from it. So I think my main advice would be sort of like, I suppose, start getting involved in whatever whatever type of animation you do. Sort of make sure you're involved in that community, whether it's online or not, and whenever there's any festivals or gatherings, going there and just learning sort of like cool, just making friends with the other people who are doing it, and then sort of you'll gradually see that opportunities come from that, and sort of like, because you're friends with this guy, then maybe he'll have this one problem he needs that you're the guy to fix, and that's sort of like how you can get in. It's not all about being the best guy. A lot of the time it is just about being the guy that they know and who's there and they get on with. So it's this kind of mix. I suppose that would be my main actual advice to animators.
Well, Tommy, thank you for taking the time to be interviewed.
It was a pleasure.
You gave some wonderful answers.
Thanks.
If you'd like to see Tommy's animations and hear his music, then head to ockeroid.newgrounds.com. He's a very talented individual with a knack for comedy, music, and animation. You can follow Ockeroid and me, Jambareeqi, on Twitter. Head to jambareeqi.com to check out other things I have produced.